You're not blind. It's her fault, the poor girl tells the businessman. Harrison Reed felt the world darkening around him without knowing why. The successful businessman who had always controlled every detail of his ventures now stumbled over furniture in his own home and increasingly relied on his wife Eleanor's help for simple tasks. It was during a morning walk in the park of the coastal town of Cape May, where they lived, that everything changed. Harrison walked slowly, leaning on Eleanor's arm, when he tripped on a root and fell heavily onto a wooden bench. His sunglasses almost slipped from his face. "Careful, sir," a child's voice sounded beside him. A girl of about 8, wearing a grey coat already faded with time, and a skirt with small flowers, approached with quick steps. Her blonde hair was a bit messy, but her blue eyes shone with an intelligence that caught Harrison's attention. "Are you hurt?" asked the child, extending her small hand to help him. "No, dear, thank you," Harrison replied, feeling touched by the girl's kindness. "I'm just having some trouble seeing." Eleanor quickly approached, adjusting the red coat she wore. "Come on, Harrison. We can't be late for the appointment," she said, casting an impatient glance at the child. The girl tilted her head, observing Harrison with curiosity. "Can you see the colors of the leaves on that tree over there?" she asked, pointing to a nearby magnolia. Harrison hesitated for a moment, then answered, "I see some yellow and green patches." The girl's expression changed slightly, as if something had intrigued her. "And can you see the color of my coat?" she insisted. "Gray," Harrison replied without hesitation. The child fell silent for a few seconds, her eyes watching Harrison's face intently. There was something in her way of looking that made him uncomfortable, as if she were seeing something she shouldn't. "Let's go, Harrison," Eleanor insisted, firmly taking her husband's arm. "The girl needs to get back to where she belongs, right?" "My name is Maya," said the child, ignoring Eleanor's impolite tone. "I live at the shelter nearby. I always come here in the morning because it's quiet and I can think." Harrison felt a pang in his chest, a child so young living in a shelter. "Maya is a beautiful name," he said with a genuine smile. "Maybe we'll see each other around here again." "I hope so," replied Maya, but her eyes remained fixed on Harrison, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. Eleanor practically dragged her husband away from the bench, muttering something about delays and appointments. But Harrison couldn't get the girl out of his head. There was something in the way she had observed him, a seriousness that didn't match her age. In the following days, Harrison's routine remained the same. Waking up early, having the coffee specially prepared by Eleanor, trying to work a little from home since he could no longer go to the office, and taking his morning walk in the park. Each day, his vision seemed to worsen a little more. The letters on the computer became blurry. People's faces turned into indistinct blurs. "The doctors said it's a rare case," Eleanor explained to acquaintances who came to visit them. "A progressive degeneration with no cure. Poor Harrison, he's suffering so much." And Eleanor truly seemed to suffer alongside her husband. She accompanied him to all medical appointments, prepared his meals with special care, organized his medications. She was the dedicated wife any man would want in a difficult time. But something bothered Harrison, a strange feeling he couldn't define, as if there were an important detail escaping his perception. Maybe it was just the desperation of someone losing their sight, he thought. It was on Thursday of the following week that Maya appeared again. Harrison was sitting on the same bench, waiting for Eleanor, who had gone to buy water at the nearby snack bar. The morning sun filtered through the leaves of the magnolia, creating dancing shadows on the ground. "Hi, Mr. Harrison," said Maya, sitting next to him on the bench. Harrison started slightly. He hadn't seen her approach. "Hi, Maya. How did you know my name?" "I heard the lady in the red coat talking to other people," she replied simply. "Are you getting worse?" The child's direct question caught him off guard. Most adults avoided speaking openly about his condition, using euphemisms and roundabout ways. "A little," admitted Harrison. "Each day it gets harder to see." Maya was silent for a few seconds, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. "At the shelter there's a lady who went blind when she was younger," she said thoughtfully. "Mrs. Martha, she taught me some things about what it's like when you can't see right." "And what did she teach you?" Harrison asked, genuinely interested. She said that when a person is really going blind, the first things to go are the small details. The edges of things get blurry first, and that it's very hard to see different colors when the light is dim. Harrison nodded, thinking it made sense. But the strange thing is that you can see the colors of things really clearly, continued Maya, her voice filled with childish curiosity. Yesterday you said my coat was gray, and today you said that flower over there is yellow. Mrs. Martha always mixes up colors when the light isn't very strong. Maya's comment created a knot in Harrison's stomach. He hadn't thought about it before, but it was true. Even with his supposedly deteriorating vision, he could still distinguish colors easily. Maybe it's because my condition is different from Mrs. Martha's, he suggested, but his voice sounded less convincing than he would have liked. Could be, Maya agreed, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Eleanor appeared at that moment carrying a bottle of water and visibly irritated to see Maya again. Harrison, we've talked about this. You shouldn't be chatting with strangers. Your condition requires special care, she said, forcing a smile for Maya. Dear, I'm sure your caregivers at the shelter are worried about you. They know where I am, Maya replied calmly. I always come here at this time. Well, but now you need to go back. Harrison has an important doctor's appointment, Eleanor said, extending her hand to help her husband stand up. Goodbye, Mr. Harrison. Maya said goodbye, but her eyes remained fixed on him until she disappeared among the trees. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On the way home, Harrison couldn't stop thinking about Maya's words. There was a disturbing logic to her observations. If his vision was truly deteriorating progressively, why could he still perceive so many details when he paid attention? Eleanor, he said when they got home, don't you think it's strange that I can still see colors so well? Eleanor stopped putting away her purse and turned to him with a worried expression. Harrison, you can't keep torturing yourself with these doubts. The doctors explain that every case is different. Your condition has unique characteristics. She approached and touched his face affectionately. You need to accept it and focus on the treatment. But what if we're missing something important? What if there's another diagnosis? Harrison, we've consulted the best specialists, Dr. Kensington was very clear about your condition, Eleanor sighed deeply. I know it's hard to accept, but we have to focus on adapting to the new reality. Eleanor was right, of course. They had consulted 3 different specialists, all reaching the same conclusion: a rare degeneration with no known cure. Dr. Kensington especially had been very detailed in his explanations. But something continued to bother Harrison, a restlessness that grew each day, fueled by the innocent questions of an 8-year-old girl. That evening, during dinner specially prepared by Eleanor, Harrison discreetly observed his wife. She seemed more tense than usual, nervously fidgeting with her wedding ring while talking about everyday matters. Eleanor, have you been all right? He asked. Of course. Why do you ask? You seem worried about something beyond my situation. Eleanor dropped her fork onto her plate with a metallic clatter. Harrison, I'm taking care of you 24 hours a day, organizing appointments, medications, looking after the house. Of course I'm worried and tired. Her voice had a tone of irritation that Harrison rarely heard. I'm sorry, my love. You've been wonderful. I don't know what I'd do without you. Eleanor's expression softened immediately. Forgive me for being sharp. It's just that sometimes all of this is very heavy. She stood up and kissed his forehead. I'll get your evening medication. While Eleanor was out of the room, Harrison tried to focus on the food. The meal was delicious as always. Eleanor had always been an excellent cook, but lately she insisted on preparing all his meals personally, saying it was important to maintain a specific diet for his condition. When she returned with the medicine, Harrison took the pills without question. It was a routine established a few weeks ago: medication for his blood pressure, special vitamins recommended by Dr. Kensington, and a new supplement Eleanor had researched online. Harrison, said Eleanor, sitting beside him, I've been thinking about that girl from the park. Maya? Yes. I don't think it's healthy for you to keep talking to her. Children ask questions that might confuse you. making you question things the doctors have already clarified. Harrison fell silent, processing his wife's words. She's just a curious child, Eleanor, and she's alone in the world. I don't see a problem with being kind to her. I understand your good intentions, Harrison, but you're in a vulnerable moment. You don't need outside influences creating unnecessary doubts. There was something in Eleanor's tone that Harrison couldn't quite identify. It was as if she were genuinely worried, but there was also an urgency in her words that seemed disproportionate. All right, he agreed finally. If it makes you feel more at ease, I'll avoid talking to her. Eleanor smiled and kissed his cheek. Thank you for understanding, my love. It's all for your own good. That night, Harrison had trouble falling asleep. His thoughts circled around Maya's observations and Eleanor's reaction. There were connections his brain was trying to make, but they seemed to slip away every time he neared a conclusion. Around 2 in the morning, he woke up thirsty. He got up carefully, trying not to wake Eleanor, and walked to the kitchen. To his surprise, he managed to move through the house without much difficulty, avoiding furniture and obstacles as if his vision were perfectly normal. This made him stop in the middle of the hallway. How had he navigated the dark house so easily if his sight was deteriorating? He returned to the bedroom with that question hammering in his mind. The next day, Harrison decided to run a test. During his morning walk, he asked Eleanor to stay a bit behind him and tried to walk alone on the park trail. To his surprise, he managed to cover almost the entire path without stumbling or getting lost. "You're adapting very well," Eleanor commented, but there was something forced in her praise. "Maybe my eyesight isn't getting worse as fast as we thought," Harrison suggested. "Harrison, don't get your hopes up. The doctors were clear about the prognosis," Eleanor replied quickly, almost impatiently. When they reached the bench where they always rested, Maya was already there, as if waiting for them. Harrison hesitated, remembering the conversation from the previous night, but the girl approached before he could avoid her. "Mr. Harrison," she called, running up to them. "I have an important question to ask." Eleanor sighed, visibly annoyed. "Maya, we've already talked about this. Mr. Harrison needs peace and quiet." "But it's important," insisted the girl, looking directly at Harrison. "Last night I talked with Mrs. Martha about people who go blind. She told me something very strange." Harrison felt his heart race. "What did she say?" Maya glanced quickly at Eleanor, then turned her attention back to Harrison. "She said that when a person is truly losing their sight, they also lose the ability to move well in the dark, that it becomes much harder to judge distances and avoid obstacles." The observation struck Harrison like a bolt of lightning. That was exactly what he had noticed the night before. "But you walk super well," Maya continued. "Yesterday I saw you leaving your house in the early morning to get something from the kitchen. You didn't trip over anything or feel your way along the walls." The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison felt the blood run cold in his veins. How could Maya have seen him in the early morning? Where was she? "What were you doing near our house in the middle of the night?" Eleanor asked in a dangerously low voice. Maya seemed to realize she had said something she shouldn't have. I couldn't sleep at the shelter. Sometimes I go out for a walk when no one else is awake. That's when I saw Mr. Harrison at the kitchen window." "That's very strange, Maya," said Harrison, trying to stay calm. "Our house is far from the shelter." The girl lowered her eyes, clearly embarrassed. "I know, but sometimes I like to walk far to think. And I ended up passing by your street." Eleanor stood up abruptly. "This is unacceptable. A child shouldn't be wandering around town in the middle of the night. I'm going to speak with those in charge at the shelter." She took Harrison's arm firmly. "Let's go, now." "Mr. Harrison," Maya called as they were already walking away, "please be careful about who prepares your food." The sentence made Harrison stop immediately. He turned to look at the girl, who was watching him with an expression too serious for her age. "What did you say?" "Maya, that's enough," Eleanor almost shouted. "You've gone too far." But Harrison didn't move. There was something in the way Maya had spoken those words, an urgency that couldn't be ignored. "Please, explain what you meant," he asked. Maya looked hesitantly at Eleanor, then back at Harrison. "Mrs. Martha told me that certain plants and medicines can make eyesight go bad temporarily. She said she's seen it happen to other people, and that it always stopped when the person stopped eating what was causing the problem. The world seemed to stop for Harrison. Every word from Maya echoed in his mind, connecting dots he had refused to see. "That's ridiculous," said Eleanor, but her voice trembled slightly. "Harrison, you're not going to listen to a child's fantasies, are you?" But Harrison was looking at Maya with a sudden clarity that frightened him. The girl wasn't making up wild theories. She was trying to communicate something she had deduced with her childlike logic, but that could be the key to understanding everything. "Maya," he said calmly, "did Mrs. Martha tell you which plants or medicines can cause this?" "Some plants that grow here in the region, and some medicines that doctors use for other things, but that can affect the eyes if a person takes them without needing to." Harrison felt his legs tremble. He thought of all the medications he had been taking, prescribed by doctors that Eleanor had chosen, prepared and organized by her every day. "Eleanor," he said slowly, "I want to see all my medications. Now." "Harrison, you're being influenced by a child. This is absurd." "It's not a request, Eleanor. It's a necessity. I want to see every medicine I'm taking and check with other doctors if they're all really necessary." The expression on Eleanor's face changed completely. The mask of the devoted wife slipped for a moment, revealing something Harrison had never seen before. Fear, panic. You don't trust me," she whispered. "It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of making sure I'm getting the correct treatment." Maya continued watching the conversation intently, as if learning something important about the adult world. "Mr. Harrison," she said softly, "can I ask one more question?" Harrison nodded yes. "Do you feel worse after eating at home or after eating outside the house?" The question hit Harrison with the force of a revelation. On the rare occasions he had eaten out in recent weeks, he always felt better, more alert, with fewer visual symptoms. "Eleanor," he said, his voice gaining a firmness he hadn't felt in a long time, "let's go home, and I want you to show me exactly what I've been taking and eating." "Harrison, please, you're letting yourself be carried away by paranoia." "It's not paranoia, it's prudence." He turned to Maya. "Thank you for your questions, Maya. Sometimes children see things that adults prefer to ignore." Maya smiled timidly. "Mrs. Martha always says the truth has no age to be spoken. I just hope you get well." During the drive home, the silence between Harrison and Eleanor was thick and heavy. He could feel the tension radiating from his wife, while in his own mind the pieces of a dark puzzle began to fit together. Arriving home, Harrison went straight to the bathroom where Eleanor organized his medications. He took all the bottles and brought them to the kitchen table. "I want you to explain to me what each of these medicines is for and who prescribed them," he said. Eleanor hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "Harrison, you know all of them. They're the medications that Dr. Kensington and the other specialists prescribed. Then there will be no problem with me calling them and confirming, right?" The pallor on Eleanor's face was instantaneous. "Why would you do that? Why don't you trust what I say?" "Because an 8-year-old girl made observations that make more sense than anything I've heard from the doctors in recent weeks." Harrison picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Kensington's office. Eleanor watched his every move with an expression that mixed desperation and something darker. "Dr. Kensington, this is Harrison Reed. I have some questions about my medication." "Yes, I can hold." While waiting, Harrison examined the bottles more closely. Some had labels he didn't recognize, names of medications he didn't remember hearing before. "Dr. Kensington? Yes, I have a list here." Harrison began to read the names of the medications. With each name he mentioned, he saw Eleanor growing more tense. The conversation lasted 15 minutes. When Harrison hung up the phone, his face was ashen. "Half of these medications were never prescribed by Dr. Kensington," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. "And some shouldn't even be used by someone in my condition." Eleanor tried to speak, but Harrison interrupted her. "Even more interesting, Dr. Kensington said my last appointment with him was 2 months ago, not last week, as you told me. Last week's appointments were with doctors he's never heard of." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wall clock. Eleanor was leaning against the wall, her hands visibly shaking. "Eleanor," said Harrison calmly, but his voice carried an authority she had never heard before. "I want you to tell me the truth, the whole truth, now." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Tears began to stream down Eleanor's face. For a moment, Harrison felt his heart soften, thinking there might be an innocent explanation for everything. But then he remembered Maya's words, the clarity with which he had been able to move around the house the night before, how his vision seemed to improve when he was away from home. I can explain," began Eleanor, her voice broken by sobs. "Then explain." Eleanor sank heavily into the kitchen chair, her hands covering her face. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she murmured. "What wasn't supposed to go this far?" The simulation, the medications, all of it." Harrison felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Even suspecting the truth, hearing the confirmation was devastating. "Why, Eleanor? Why did you do this to me?" Eleanor lifted her face, and Harrison saw not only guilt, but also a rage she could no longer hide. "Because you never paid any attention to me," she exploded. "It was always the business, always the clients, always work. I was just the pretty wife who stayed home, who took care of the house, who smiled at company parties." Harrison was stunned by the intensity of Eleanor's anger. "But that doesn't justify. She stood up abruptly. 20 years of marriage, Harrison. 20 years of being invisible to you, and suddenly when you needed care, when you became vulnerable, I finally became important." The twisted logic began to make sense to Harrison. Eleanor had felt neglected and found a desperate way to regain his attention and importance. And the fake doctors. Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Dr. Miller and Dr. Thompson are real doctors, but they're not specialists in visual problems. They believed what I told them about your symptoms and prescribed treatments based on my descriptions. And the medications that were making me sick? I researched online about substances that could cause temporary vision problems. I started mixing small amounts into your food, along with the medicines that were actually prescribed. Harrison sat down, feeling dizzy from the magnitude of the betrayal. "You poisoned me." "It wasn't poison," Eleanor protested. "They were just substances that caused temporary symptoms. I researched everything carefully to make sure they wouldn't cause permanent harm." "You can't be sure of that, Eleanor. You're not a doctor. You played with my health, with my mind, with my life." "I took care of you," she shouted. "I took better care of you than any wife would. I was always by your side, always attentive to your needs." The irony of the situation was grotesque. Eleanor genuinely believed she had been a good wife, even while deliberately harming him. "And if I hadn't found out, what was your final plan?" Eleanor hesitated, and Harrison saw in her eyes that there was more to the story. "Eleanor, what was the final plan?" You would start to gradually recover. I would reduce the doses until stopping completely, and you would be so grateful for my dedication during your illness that our relationship would be different." "Different how?" "Closer. You would value me more, maybe even include me more in the business, since I had proven capable of taking care of you in such a difficult time." Harrison shook his head, incredulous at the complexity of Eleanor's plan. "And if I had been left with permanent damage?" "I researched everything," she insisted. "The doses were calculated not to cause lasting harm." "You can't be sure of that. And even if you could, what you did is a crime, Eleanor. It's attempted poisoning." "It wasn't attempted poisoning. It was a desperate way to save our marriage." The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Harrison and Eleanor looked at each other, both tense. "We're not expecting anyone," murmured Harrison. He went to the door and to his surprise found Maya on the other side. The girl seemed nervous, fidgeting with her hands as she spoke. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Harrison, but I need to speak with you urgently." "Maya, it's not a good time. It's about Mrs. Eleanor. I saw her talking with a strange man yesterday afternoon after our talk in the park." Harrison felt his blood run cold. There was more to Eleanor's story than she had told. "What man?" "An older man, in a blue suit. They seemed to be arguing about something. Mrs. Eleanor was very nervous." Harrison turned to Eleanor, who had paled even more. "Who was the man, Eleanor?" I don't know what the girl is talking about. Maya, said Harrison, can you describe this man better? Grey hair, glasses, he was driving a black car. Mrs. Eleanor handed him an envelope. Harrison walked back to the living room, followed by Maya. Eleanor was leaning against the wall, clearly in a panic. Eleanor, I want to know who that man was now. It was just an acquaintance. What acquaintance gets envelopes from you while you're poisoning your husband? Maya's eyes widened at the word poisoning, but she remained silent. Harrison, please. Who was it, Eleanor? Eleanor's resistance finally gave way. It was Dr. Sterling Vance. The name hit Harrison like a punch to the stomach. Dr. Sterling Vance was his long-time business rival, someone who had lost several important bids to Harrison's company over the years. Sterling Vance, what does he have to do with all this? Eleanor let herself slide down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. He approached me a few months ago, said he knew I was unhappy in the marriage. He made an offer. What offer? If I could get you to step away from the business, temporarily, he would help me take over the company. As your wife, I would have legal rights if you became incapacitated. The enormity of the betrayal was revealing itself layer by layer. It wasn't just a desperate wife trying to save a marriage. It was a conspiracy to destroy his professional life. And after I took control, Sterling said he would help me run everything, that we would be partners. And you believed him? Harrison asked, incredulous. I wanted to believe. I wanted a chance to be important, to make decisions, to have a real role in your life. Maya, who had remained quiet during the entire revelation, finally spoke. Mrs. Eleanor, the man in the blue suit didn't seem to be being kind to you yesterday. He seemed to be ordering you to do something. Eleanor looked at the girl with a mixture of surprise and fear. What else did you hear? He said something about you having to speed things up because it was taking too long and someone might get suspicious. Harrison sank heavily onto the sofa. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. Eleanor wasn't just a desperate wife. She had become a puppet in Sterling Vance's hands. Eleanor, do you realize Sterling was using you? That as soon as he got what he wanted, you'd be discarded? No. He promised. He promised what? To share a company he would have stolen? Do you really believe a man capable of devising a plan like that would keep his promises? Reality began to dawn in Eleanor's eyes. She had been manipulated by Sterling, just as she had manipulated Harrison. I thought I would finally have a chance to be respected, to have value. Eleanor, you have always had value. The problem is you chose the most destructive path possible to express your frustrations. Maya timidly approached Harrison. Mr. Harrison, what's going to happen now? It was a simple question from a child, but it summed up the entire complexity of the situation. What would really happen now? How would it be possible to move forward after such betrayal? I don't know, Maya. I'm still trying to understand all of this. Are you going to be okay now? Will your eyesight go back to normal? Harrison tried to focus on distant objects in the room. Gradually, he realized his vision was indeed clearer than it had been in weeks. I think so. It seems to be getting better already. That's good. Maya smiled for the first time since she had arrived. Mrs. Martha always says the body knows how to heal when we stop harming it. The child's simple wisdom contrasted drastically with the complexity of the situation created by the adults. Maya, said Harrison, how did you know where I live? The truth this time. The girl lowered her eyes, clearly ashamed. I followed you a few times after our talks in the park. I was worried about you, because the things Mrs. Eleanor said didn't match what Mrs. Martha had taught me about people who go blind. And why did you care so much? Maya thought for a moment before answering. At the shelter, we learn to notice when someone is lying, or when someone is in danger. It's a matter of survival. She looked at Eleanor, then back at Harrison. And I felt you were in danger, even though I didn't really understand why. The instinct of an abandoned child had been more accurate than all the trust of a grown man in his own wife. Harrison, said Eleanor, rising from the floor, I know I've ruined everything. I know you may never forgive me, but please don't report me. I don't want to go to jail. Eleanor, you poisoned your own husband and conspired to steal his company. Do you think you can just apologize and move on? But I never meant to really hurt you. I researched everything to make sure it would be reversible. That doesn't change the fact that you did it, and that there was a bigger plan behind it all. Maya watched the argument intently, as if learning about the complexities of adult relationships. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "can I ask a question?" "Of course, Maya. What did you feel in your heart when you thought you were going blind?" The question caught Harrison off guard. He thought for a moment about all the emotions he had experienced in the past weeks. Fear, a lot of fear. Fear of not being able to work anymore, of becoming a burden, of losing my independence. "And what do you feel in your heart now, that you know the truth?" Another profound question from an 8-year-old. Harrison reflected carefully. Anger, sadness, a sense of betrayal, but also relief. A lot of relief to find out I can have my life back. Maya nodded gravely. "Mrs. Martha says that sometimes people do very bad things because they themselves have a lot of fear or a lot of sadness in their hearts." Harrison looked at Eleanor, trying to see beyond the anger he felt. "You're right, Maya, but that doesn't excuse what was done." "I know," the girl agreed. "Mrs. Martha also says that understanding why someone did a bad thing doesn't mean the thing stops being bad." Maya's emotional maturity continued to surprise Harrison. Where had an 8-year-old child learned so much wisdom about human behavior? "Maya, can I ask you something about yourself?" "You can." "How did you become so observant, so wise for your age?" Maya sat on the floor, crossing her legs. "When my parents left, I felt very lost and scared. At the shelter, the older kids taught me that to survive you have to pay attention to everything. Watch how people act, what they say, how they behave when they think no one is watching." "And you applied that with me and Eleanor?" "Yes. Since the first time we talked, something didn't seem right. Mrs. Eleanor said you were going blind, but you reacted to things like someone who sees well, and she got nervous every time I asked questions." Eleanor, who had remained silent during this conversation, finally spoke. "An 8-year-old child figured out my plan because she was more observant than my own husband." There was bitterness in her voice, but also a kind of reluctant admiration. "Eleanor," said Harrison, "Maya figured it out because she had no reason to blindly trust you. She observed with neutral eyes. I trusted you, so I didn't question your actions." "And that trust was my greatest weakness," murmured Eleanor. "No, Eleanor. Your greatest weakness was choosing manipulation and betrayal instead of honest communication about your feelings." The phone rang, interrupting the tense conversation. Harrison answered and immediately recognized the voice on the other end of the line. "Harrison, it's Sterling Vance. We need to talk urgently." Harrison looked at Eleanor, whose face had turned pale. "About what, Sterling?" "About the developments in your health situation. I heard you're having serious vision problems." The arrogance in Sterling's voice was evident. He still believed his plan was working perfectly. "Interesting you mentioned that, Sterling. How did you hear about my health problems?" "Oh, you know how small towns are. News travels fast." Harrison decided to test how far Sterling was willing to go with his charade. "Well, you're right. My vision is deteriorating rapidly. The doctors say I might have to step back from business soon." "What a terrible situation." Sterling feigned compassion. "If you need help managing your affairs during this difficult time, you know you can count on me." "How generous of you, Sterling, but I'm sure Eleanor will be able to handle everything." "Ah, yes, Eleanor, an admirable woman. I'm sure she's being a great support right now." "Without a doubt. By the way, Sterling, since you're offering to help, how about we meet tomorrow? Perhaps we can discuss some options." "Excellent idea. How about my office at 2 in the afternoon?" "Perfect. Until then." Harrison hung up and turned to Eleanor and Maya. Sterling just fell into his own trap. Tomorrow I'm going to have a very enlightening conversation with him. "What are you going to do?" asked Eleanor, clearly worried. "I'm going to give him exactly what he thinks he wants, and then I'm going to show him that I know everything." Maya clapped her hands excitedly. "Like in the movies, the villain thinks he's winning, but the hero is just pretending." Maya's childish analogy was surprisingly accurate. "That's right, Maya." Sometimes you have to let people betray themselves. But Harrison, said Eleanor, what if Sterling suspects something? He's so confident in the plan's success, he won't even consider that possibility. His arrogance is our greatest advantage. That night, Harrison could barely sleep. His mind worked feverishly, planning every detail of the meeting with Sterling. Eleanor had locked herself in the guest room, claiming she couldn't sleep beside him after everything that had been revealed. Around midnight, Harrison heard noises coming from the kitchen. He got up silently and found Eleanor sitting at the table with a pile of papers scattered in front of her. "What are you doing?" Eleanor startled, clearly not expecting to see him. I'm gathering evidence of everything I did, all the fake prescriptions, the contacts with Sterling, the medication research I did online." "Why?" "Because tomorrow, when you confront Sterling, you'll need proof. And because maybe it's the only way to prove I'm truly sorry." Harrison sat at the table and examined the papers. There were pages and pages of detailed notes about dosages, expected effects, administration schedules. Eleanor's plan had been meticulously crafted. "Eleanor, why are you doing this now?" She looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Because that girl was right about everything, and because I realized Sterling never intended to keep his promises. He used me and I let him. And now I want to try to fix at least some of the damage I caused, even if you never forgive me, even if I have to face the legal consequences." Harrison studied his wife's face. For the first time in weeks, he saw something resembling the woman he had married years ago. "Eleanor, when all this started, what did you really want?" The question caught her off guard. I wanted you to see me, value me, feel like I was important in your life, not just an accessory. And you believe poisoning me was the way to achieve that?" "At first, it wasn't that. At first, I just wanted you to spend more time at home, to need me more. But when Sterling showed up with that proposal, everything became more complex." "How did he convince you?" Eleanor sighed deeply. "He said I was being wasted, that I had the potential to be so much more than just a wife. He promised to teach me about the business, that we would be real partners." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe. I was so desperate for recognition that I ignored all the signs I was being manipulated." Harrison realized that, in a sense, Eleanor was also a victim in the situation, a victim of her own insecurities and of Sterling's manipulation. "Eleanor, tomorrow when I meet with Sterling, I want you to be there." "What do you mean?" "I want you to see with your own eyes how he really thinks about you, how he planned to discard you as soon as he got what he wanted." Eleanor hesitated. "I don't know if I have the courage." "You had the courage to poison me for weeks. Now you need the courage to face the consequences and help fix the situation." The next morning, Harrison woke up feeling his vision clearer than it had been in a long time. Every object in the room was sharp, every color vibrant. It was as if a veil had been removed from his eyes. During breakfast, which he prepared for himself for the first time in weeks, Maya appeared at the kitchen window. "Mr. Harrison, how do you feel today?" "Much better, Maya. My vision is almost completely normal." "That's great. Mrs. Martha said that when the body stops getting the bad stuff, it heals up real quick. Maya, I want to thank you. If it weren't for your questions and observations, I might have taken much longer to discover the truth." The girl smiled proudly. "Mrs. Martha also says that sometimes children can see things that adults don't see because we aren't as afraid of the truth." Eleanor appeared in the kitchen at that moment, dressed formally as if preparing for a business meeting. "Good morning, Maya," she said, her voice laden with embarrassment. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. Are you all right?" "I'm trying to be." Maya studied Eleanor's face with her penetrating gaze. "Are you afraid of what will happen today?" "Yes, I am." "Mrs. Martha says that when we've done something wrong, fear is normal, but that it's better to face the truth than to keep lying." "Your friend Mrs. Martha is very wise," said Eleanor, forcing a sad smile. "She had to learn to be. She went through many difficult things in life." Harrison observed the interaction between Eleanor and Maya with interest. There was something therapeutic in the way the child spoke about truth and consequences, without judgment or anger, just with a practical wisdom gained through her own hardships. "Maya," said Harrison, "would you like to come with us today?" "Where to?" "We're going to have a very important meeting, a meeting where many truths will be revealed." Maya hesitated. "Can I help?" "Your presence has already helped us more than you know, but today will be a conversation between adults, with things that might not be appropriate for you to hear." "I understand." Maya seemed disappointed, but accepted the explanation. "But," Harrison continued, "when all this is over, I'd like to talk to you about your future." "My future?" "Yes. About education, about opportunities, about what you'd like to be when you grow up." Maya's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? You helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to help you." Eleanor watched the conversation with a complex expression, mixing guilt and something that seemed like envy of the genuine connection between Harrison and Maya. "Harrison," she said when Maya left, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you being so kind to this girl? After everything that happened, wouldn't it be easier to just move on without getting involved with anyone else?" Harrison thought carefully before answering. "Eleanor, Maya showed me something I had forgotten. The importance of honesty, of careful observation, of asking difficult questions. She reminded me that there are people in the world who need genuine help, not manipulation. And me. You need help too, Eleanor, but it's a different kind of help. You need to learn to deal with your insecurities and frustrations in a healthy way, not a destructive one. Do you think that's possible? I hope it is, but that will depend entirely on you." At 2 in the afternoon, Harrison and Eleanor arrived at Sterling Vance's office. The building was imposing, clearly designed to impress clients and intimidate rivals. Sterling greeted them personally in the lobby, with a smile that Harrison now perceived as false and calculating. "Harrison, so good to see you." Sterling shook his hand with excessive force. "Eleanor, darling, as radiant as ever." Eleanor murmured a greeting, avoiding eye contact. "Come, let's go to my office. I have some interesting proposals to discuss." Sterling's office was excessively luxurious, with imported furniture and a panoramic view of the city. It was clearly designed to demonstrate success and power. "Please have a seat. Can I offer you anything, coffee, water?" "No, thank you," said Harrison. "I'd prefer to get straight to the point." Of course. A businessman as always," Sterling laughed, but there was an underlying tension in his voice. "So tell me about your current situation." Harrison decided to give Sterling exactly what he wanted to hear. "As you might imagine, my vision problems are forcing me to reconsider my active role in the company. The doctors are pessimistic about my chances of recovery." Sterling tried to look concerned, but Harrison could see the poorly disguised satisfaction in his eyes. "What a terrible situation. Have you been thinking about your options?" "Actually, yes. Eleanor and I have discussed the possibility of her temporarily taking over the company's management." "Excellent idea. Eleanor is a very capable woman." Sterling looked at Eleanor with what seemed like approval. "So, of course, managing a company of your size requires specific experience and knowledge." "That's true," agreed Harrison. "That's why we're considering finding an experienced partner, someone who can guide Eleanor during this transition period." "How interesting." Sterling couldn't hide his excitement. "May I suggest you consider my firm as that partner? I have extensive experience in the sector and would be delighted to help Eleanor during this difficult time." Eleanor shifted uncomfortably in her chair, beginning to see how Sterling was manipulating the conversation. "How generous of you, Sterling," said Harrison. "What kind of partnership do you have in mind?" "Well," Sterling leaned forward, clearly animated, "I could take over the day-to-day operations, guide Eleanor on strategic decisions, handle the more complex aspects of the business. And in return? A modest share of the profits. Let's say 60% to cover my costs and risks, 40% for you." Harrison had to make an effort not to laugh at Sterling's generosity. 60%? That doesn't seem very modest. "Harrison, you need to understand the complexity of the situation. Taking over the management of a company in crisis, training someone with no experience, Dealing with clients worried about instability, it's a huge risk on my part. Crisis? My company is not in crisis, Sterling. Sterling realized his slip, but tried to recover quickly. Of course it's not in crisis operationally, but the uncertainty about your leadership will certainly create concerns in the market. I see, said Harrison. And what would happen if my vision were to recover unexpectedly? Well, that would be wonderful, of course, but the doctors were clear about the low chances of recovery, weren't they? Harrison looked at Eleanor, who was becoming visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Eleanor, don't you have anything to say about this proposal? Eleanor hesitated, looking nervously between Harrison and Sterling. I think we would need to discuss the details more carefully. Of course, Sterling quickly agreed. These are just the general parameters. We can negotiate the details later. Harrison decided it was time to show his hand. Sterling, may I ask a question? How did you find out exactly about my vision problems? The question caught Sterling off guard. As I mentioned yesterday, news travels fast in small towns. Interesting, because I haven't spoken about my problems with anyone except doctors and close family, and doctors have professional confidentiality. Sterling began to sweat slightly. Well, you know how rumors are. Actually, Sterling, I know exactly how you found out about my problems, because you were one of the architects of them. The silence in the office was deafening. Sterling turned pale, while Eleanor lowered her head, unable to look at either man. I don't know what you're talking about. Sterling tried to maintain his composure. No? Then let me clarify. Harrison stood up and walked to the window. A few months ago, you approached my wife with a proposal. You knew she was feeling neglected in our marriage and exploited that vulnerability. Harrison, that's absurd. You suggested she create a situation where I would be temporarily incapacitated, forcing me to transfer control of the company to her, and then you offered yourself as a partner to help her manage the business. I never... Eleanor, said Harrison without turning around, show him the papers you prepared last night. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then took a folder from her bag. With trembling hands, she handed it to Harrison, who placed it on Sterling's table. These are detailed records of all the substances Eleanor administered to me, all the fake medical appointments she organized, and all your communications with her. Sterling looked at the papers, his confidence evaporating rapidly. Even if that were true, you can't prove I was involved, can't I? Harrison smiled coldly. Eleanor, tell Sterling about the envelopes you delivered to him. They were reports on the progress of your condition, murmured Eleanor. Sterling wanted regular updates on how you were reacting to the treatment. And the payments? He paid me for each report, said it was to cover the extra expenses I was having with medical care. Sterling realized he was cornered. Even if that were true, it's not a crime to inquire about the well-being of a business rival. You're right, Harrison agreed. But it is a crime to conspire to incapacitate someone through poisoning with the aim of taking control of their company. Poisoning is a very strong word. It's the legally correct word for administering harmful substances to someone without their knowledge or consent. Sterling stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. You have no proof of anything, and any accusation will be treated as slander. Sterling, said Harrison calmly, sit down. There was something in Harrison's voice that made Sterling hesitate. You haven't heard the best part of the story yet. Harrison returned to his chair, maintaining constant eye contact with Sterling. My vision is completely normal. It always has been, ever since I stopped consuming the substances Eleanor was mixing into my food. The revelation hit Sterling like a bolt of lightning. That's impossible. The doctors confirmed. The doctors Eleanor chose based on symptoms she reported. When I consulted my real doctors, I found there was never anything wrong with me. Sterling slumped heavily into his chair. You're bluffing. Harrison took a document from his folder. This is a complete medical report dated yesterday. My vision is perfect. There are no signs of any degeneration or visual problem. But Eleanor said... Eleanor lied. On your orders. And now you will both face the legal consequences of your actions. Sterling looked at Eleanor with anger. You told me everything was working perfectly. That he was completely dependent on you. It was, Eleanor defended herself, until a girl from the shelter started asking questions and he got suspicious. A girl from the shelter? Sterling seemed incredulous. You were discovered by a child? A very observant child, said Harrison. More observant than any of us. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Sterling ran his hands through his hair, clearly panicking. Look, maybe we can reach an agreement. No one needs to involve the authorities. We can settle this among ourselves like civilized people. What kind of agreement? Asked Harrison. I completely remove myself from your business. I never have contact with you again. In exchange, you forget this conversation ever happened. What about Eleanor? Eleanor too. Both of us will completely step out of your life. Harrison looked at his wife, who seemed to be in shock at how quickly Sterling was willing to abandon her. Sterling, he said, do you really believe you can conspire to poison someone and then simply step away when you're discovered? Harrison, be reasonable. No one was permanently harmed. Your vision is normal. Your company suffered no real damage. No one was harmed? Harrison stood up, his voice laden with indignation. You made me believe I was losing my sight. You made me live through weeks of terror thinking my productive life was ending. But it was temporary. And that justifies nothing. Harrison slammed his fist on the table. You destroyed my trust, my peace of mind, my faith in the people closest to me. Eleanor began to cry silently. Harrison, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Sorry isn't enough, Eleanor. Both of you made conscious decisions that could have completely destroyed me. Sterling made one last attempt to negotiate. Harrison, let's be practical. A legal process would be long, expensive, and publicly embarrassing for everyone involved. Your business reputation could suffer when people find out you were deceived by your own wife. You think I care what people will think? Every businessman cares about his reputation. You're wrong, Sterling. I care more about justice than appearances. Harrison headed for the door. Eleanor, let's go. We have a police station to visit. Harrison, wait! Sterling stood up desperately. What if I financially compensate for all the damages? I can transfer valuable contracts to your company. I can... You really don't understand, do you? Harrison turned to look at him. This was never about money or business advantage. This is about two people who decided to destroy someone's life out of greed and wounded pride. Please, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm allowing you to face the legal consequences of your choices instead of seeking a more personal justice. Sterling understood the implication and paled even further. You wouldn't do that. You're right, I wouldn't. Because I'm not like you. I believe in the justice system and the rule of law. Harrison and Eleanor left Sterling's office, leaving him alone with the weight of his actions. On the way to the police station, Eleanor remained silent, absorbing the magnitude of what she had lost. Harrison, she finally said, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but can I ask one last question? Go ahead. Do you think you could ever forgive me? Harrison drove in silence for a few blocks before answering. Eleanor, forgiveness is something that happens with time and inner work. Right now I'm focused on dealing with the practical consequences of what happened. I understand, but I can say I hope you use this experience to become a better person, to learn to handle your frustrations and insecurities in a constructive way. And if I do that, if I really change, then perhaps in the future we can have a conversation about forgiveness, but that will depend entirely on your actions from now on. Arriving at the police station, Harrison and Eleanor were met by Chief Inspector Miller, an experienced man who listened to the whole story with professional attention. Helena presented all the documents she had prepared, confessing in detail her involvement in the conspiracy. This is a very unusual situation, the Chief Inspector commented. It's not common to see cases of spousal poisoning for business fraud purposes. What happens now? Asked Harrison. We will open a formal inquiry. Eleanor Reed and Sterling Vance will be called to give official statements. Depending on the evidence, charges may include attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted embezzlement. And the penalties? They could be significant. We're talking about serious crimes involving premeditation and conspiracy. Eleanor turned to Harrison with eyes full of tears. "Harrison, I accept all the consequences of what I did, but I want you to know that, despite everything, what I felt for you was real. It was twisted and sick, but it was real." Harrison nodded gravely. "Eleanor, I hope you find a way to channel your feelings in a healthy manner in the future, and I hope you learn to value honesty above all else." When they left the police station, Harrison felt strangely relieved. The weight of uncertainty had finally been lifted from his shoulders. His vision was clear, his mind was focused, and he had a new perspective on what truly mattered in life. On the way back home, he decided to stop at the park where it all began. He found Maya sitting on the same bench where they had met, playing with some colorful pebbles. "Hi, Mr. Harrison. How was the meeting?" "It was enlightening, Maya. Very enlightening." "Did the man in the blue suit confess he was being bad?" "In a way, yes. And Eleanor also admitted her involvement in everything." Maya nodded gravely. "Mrs. Martha always says the truth has a way of coming out, even when people try to hide it. Your friend Mrs. Martha is right about many things. Mr. Harrison, can I ask what will happen now?" Harrison sat down beside her on the bench. "Well, Eleanor and Sterling will have to face the legal consequences of what they did. I will go back to work as usual, and you and I are going to have a conversation about your future." "My future?" "Yes. About education, about opportunities, about how I can help you build the life you deserve." Maya's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Really? Really? You saved me, Maya. Now it's my turn to return the favor." "But I didn't do anything special, I just asked questions. Sometimes asking the right questions is the most important thing anyone can do." That night, Harrison called his lawyers and his work team, explaining the situation and beginning the process of fully regaining control of his company. He also started researching educational programs and opportunities for children in vulnerable situations. In the following days, as the legal case against Eleanor and Sterling unfolded, Harrison spent a lot of time with Maya, getting to know her story and her aspirations better. He discovered she was an exceptionally intelligent child, with a natural curiosity about how things worked. "Maya," he said during one of their conversations in the park, "have you ever thought about what you'd like to study when you're older? Mrs. Martha always says I'd be good at helping people, maybe psychology or social work. Those are very noble professions, and you certainly have the necessary qualities. But for that I'd need to study a lot, right? And studying is expensive. Maya, I want to make you a proposal. How about if I fund your entire education from now through university?" Maya's eyes widened. "You would do that for me?" "Not just that. I want to create a program at my company specifically to help children like you, smart, observant children who need opportunities. Like an adoption program. Not exactly adoption, but something similar. A mentorship and educational support program. You would be the first beneficiary, but not the only one." Maya was silent for a long moment, processing the magnitude of the offer. "Mr. Harrison, why are you doing all this for me?" "Because you showed me the value of honesty and careful observation. Because you had the courage to question things that adults accepted without thinking. And because I believe people like you can make the world a better place. What if I'm not smart enough to take advantage of these opportunities? Maya, you uncovered a conspiracy that I, with all my business experience, failed to notice. Don't doubt your intelligence." A few weeks later, the local media covered the case extensively. The story of a child from a shelter who had discovered a poisoning conspiracy captured the public's imagination. Maya, with her natural wisdom and insightful observations, became a minor local celebrity. But Harrison made sure to protect her from excessive exposure, ensuring she could continue being a normal child while receiving the educational opportunities she deserved. Eleanor was sentenced to 2 years of house arrest and community service, in addition to having to pay a substantial fine. Sterling received a harsher sentence, including prison time and the loss of his business license. During the trial, Eleanor made a public statement, apologizing not only to Harrison, but to all the people who had been affected by her actions. She also announced her intention to seek psychological help to deal with her insecurities and manipulative tendencies. "Mr. Harrison, said Maya during one of their visits to the park a few months after the trial. "Mrs. Eleanor seems different." "How so?" "She came to visit me at the shelter last week. She apologized for trying to keep me away from you and said she's learning how to be more honest with herself." "And what did you think?" "I think she's still very sad and ashamed, but she seemed sincere this time. People can change, Maya. Sometimes it takes time and a lot of work, but it's possible." "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" Harrison thought carefully before answering. "I think forgiveness is a process, not a single event. Maybe with time, when I see real evidence of change, we can find a way to move forward." "And you don't feel angry anymore?" "I still do sometimes, but I also feel sorry for her. And gratitude." "Gratitude?" "Yes, because if all this hadn't happened, I would never have met you, and you've changed my life in a very positive way." Maya smiled, swinging her legs on the bench as she always did. "Mrs. Martha said something interesting yesterday." "What did she say?" "That sometimes bad things happen to lead us to the right people at the right time. Your friend Mrs. Martha really is very wise. She wants to meet you, by the way. She said anyone capable of seeing the value of a child from the shelter must be special." "I would love to meet her." The following Sunday, Harrison visited the shelter for the first time. Mrs. Martha was a lady in her 70s with white hair and kind eyes, but there was a strength in her that was immediately noticeable. "Mr. Harrison," she said, extending her hand, "Maya has told me a lot about you. I hope they were good things. She said you are one of the few people who really listens to what children have to say. Maya had very important observations to make. It would be foolish of me not to listen." Mrs. Martha smiled. "Most adults lose that ability. They get so caught up in their own concerns that they forget to pay attention to the world around them. How did you develop that wisdom Maya always mentions?" "Through many mistakes, Mr. Harrison. Many mistakes and much suffering. But also through many children like Maya, who taught me to see the world with fresh eyes." "And what did the children teach you?" "That the truth doesn't need to be complicated. How simple questions often reveal complex problems, and how genuine kindness is rare and precious." Harrison spent the afternoon at the shelter, meeting other children and talking with the caregivers. He was impressed by the team's dedication, but also by the limitations they faced due to a lack of resources. "Maya," he said as he prepared to leave, "what do you think about the idea of expanding our program to help not just you, but other children here too?" "That would be wonderful, but are you sure you want to do all this?" "I'm sure. In fact, I'm thinking of turning this into a permanent foundation, a lasting legacy." In the following months, Harrison worked tirelessly to establish the Maya Foundation, an organization dedicated to identifying and supporting talented children in vulnerable situations. The foundation offered not only educational support, but also mentorship, healthcare, and personal development opportunities. Maya became not just the first beneficiary, but also a kind of ambassador for the program, helping to identify other children who could benefit from the support offered. "Mr. Harrison," she said during one of the Foundation's planning meetings, "can I make a suggestion?" "Of course, Maya. Your suggestions are always valuable." "What if we included adults too? People like Mrs. Eleanor who did wrong things but really want to change." The suggestion caught Harrison off guard. "You think Eleanor should be helped by the Foundation?" "Not exactly her specifically, but people like her. People who lost their way but want to find a better way to live." Harrison reflected on the idea. There was a compassionate logic in Maya's suggestion that was hard to ignore. "Like a rehabilitation and second chance program?" "Yes. Mrs. Martha always says everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday." "It's an interesting idea, Maya. I'll think about it." A few months later, Harrison received a letter from Eleanor. She had completed her sentence of house arrest and was working as a volunteer at a center helping victims of domestic violence. In the letter, she explained how she had used her time for reflection and personal growth. "Harrison," she wrote, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, nor do I expect it to be granted easily. But I want you to know that I use my experience to help other women who are fighting their own inner demons. Perhaps this is a way to give some positive meaning to the wrong I did. Harrison showed the letter to Maya during one of their conversations in the park. "What do you think, Maya?" "I think she's trying to do the right thing now, but that it will take a long time for her to really prove it. And about including people like her in the Foundation's program. Maybe we could do a small pilot program, see how it works before deciding if it's a good idea." 2 years after the events that changed his life, Harrison was in the same park where it all began, but now accompanied by Maya and a dozen other children from the Foundation. They were celebrating the program's 2nd anniversary, and Maya had become a confident and articulate 10-year-old. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "can I speak for all of us?" "Of course, Maya." Maya stood up and looked at all the children present. "We want to thank you not only for the opportunities you've given us, but for teaching us that our voices matter, that our observations have value, that we can make a difference in the world." "You already make a difference," Harrison replied. "Every question you ask, every injustice you question, every act of kindness you perform makes the world a little better. And you taught us that no matter our age or where we come from, we can be agents of change." Harrison looked at all those children, each with their own story of overcome hardships and discovered potential, and felt a deep satisfaction he had never experienced before in his professional life. "Maya," he said, "can I make a confession?" "Of course." "You all taught me more than I taught you. You showed me that real success isn't measured in profits or business achievements, but in the positive impact we can have on people's lives. And we learned that having a voice and using that voice responsibly is one of the most important things we can do." That night, Harrison reflected on how his life had completely changed. Eleanor's betrayal, as painful as it had been, had led him to a fulfillment far greater than anything he had achieved before. It had transformed his perspective on values, relationships, and life's purpose. He thought of Eleanor, who, according to the latest news, was genuinely trying to rebuild her life in a positive way. He thought of Sterling, who had lost everything and was now facing the consequences of his choices. And he thought of Maya and all the other children whose lives were being transformed through the program. Revenge would have been easy. Bitterness would have been understandable. But choosing construction over destruction, hope over resentment, had created something far more valuable than any momentary satisfaction. Maya appeared at his window that night, as she sometimes did when she wanted to talk about something important. "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something?" "Always, Maya." "Do you regret anything that happened?" Harrison thought carefully about the question. "I regret the pain we all went through. I regret not noticing the signs earlier. But I don't regret the final outcome." "Why?" "Because all of it led us to build something beautiful together, and it taught me lessons I would never have learned otherwise." "And about forgiving Mrs. Eleanor." "I'm working on it, Maya. It's a slow process, but I think I'm getting there. Mrs. Martha says that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean we have to trust in the same way again. It just means letting the anger go so it doesn't hurt us anymore." "Mrs. Martha is right, as always." "Mr. Harrison?" "Yes." "Thank you for listening to my questions that day in the park. Thank you for having the courage to ask them, Maya." 5 years later, the Maya Foundation had expanded to 3 cities and helped over 200 children. Maya, now 13, had become a sought-after speaker at events about children's rights and education. Eleanor had completed a psychology course and worked as a volunteer therapist, specializing in helping women with self-esteem issues and destructive relationships. Harrison continued to run his company, but now with a renewed focus on social responsibility and ethical treatment of employees. He never married again, but found in the Foundation and its children a chosen family that brought him more joy than any previous relationship. On a sunny afternoon, he and Maya were again on the park bench where it had all begun. Maya was reading a book on child psychology for a school project. "Mr. Harrison," she said, closing the book, "sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't asked about the colors that first day." "And what do you conclude?" "That you probably would have discovered the truth eventually, but it might have taken much longer, and maybe we would never have met. And that would have been a loss for both of us. Definitely. You gave me a family and a future. And I..." And you gave me a new perspective on what really matters in life. Maya smiled, swinging her legs on the bench as she always did. You know what Mrs. Martha said the other day? What? That our story shows that sometimes people come into our lives when we need them most, even if we don't realize it at the time. Mrs. Martha is still wise. She also said that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we give. Harrison looked at Maya, now a young teenager, but still with that insightful gaze that had caught his attention years ago. Maya, can I tell you a secret? Go ahead. I used to measure my success by the numbers in my bank statement. Now I measure it by the sparkle in the children's eyes at the foundation when they discover something new about themselves. And which measurement makes you happier? You don't even need to ask, do you? Maya laughed, a joyful sound that echoed through the quiet park. Mr. Harrison, can I ask a question about the future? Of course. When I'm grown up and maybe have my own family, will you still be my friend? The question touched Harrison's heart deeply. Maya, you're not just my friend. You are my chosen family. No matter where life takes us, this connection will remain forever. Even when I'm a licensed psychologist and maybe don't need help anymore. Especially then, because then we can work together to help other people. At that moment, a younger girl approached the bench where they were sitting. She looked shy and a little lost. Excuse me, she said. Do you know where Haven of Hope is? Maya stood up immediately. Of course. Are you looking for Mrs. Martha? I am. They said she takes very good care of the children there. It's true. She's the wisest person I know. Maya looked at Harrison, then back at the girl. Would you like us to walk you there? You would do that? Of course, Harrison replied. And on the way, maybe you can tell us your story. As they walked along the familiar streets toward the shelter, the girl told them how she had lost her family and was trying to find a safe place to stay. Her words reminded Harrison and Maya of their own shared journey and how a chance meeting can completely change the course of someone's life. What's your name? Asked Maya. Anna. Audrey. Audrey is a beautiful name. I'm Maya, and this is Mr. Harrison. Do you live at the shelter too? I used to, explained Maya, but now I live with a foster family, and Mr. Harrison, well, he helps kids like us have better opportunities in life. Audrey looked at Harrison with curiosity. How so? Harrison smiled gently. I have a foundation that offers education and support for children who need a chance. Maybe, once you're settled at the shelter and feel more comfortable, we can talk about it. Really? Really. But first, let's get you settled in with Mrs. Martha. Arriving at the shelter, Mrs. Martha welcomed Audrey with the same kindness and wisdom that had marked Harrison's first meeting with Maya years before. There was something comforting about the continuity of that cycle of care and protection. Mr. Harrison, said Mrs. Martha as Audrey was taken to see the facilities, every child who arrives here brings their own story and their own questions. Some of those questions change lives. Did you always know Maya was special? All children are special, Mr. Harrison, but Maya always had a unique way of seeing through appearances to find the truth. It's a rare gift. A gift that saved my life. And that continues to save lives through your work. When they left the shelter, Maya was quieter than usual. What are you thinking about? Asked Harrison. I was thinking about how everything connects. The pain I felt when I lost my parents led me to the shelter. The shelter led me to Mrs. Martha. Mrs. Martha taught me to observe and ask questions. Those skills led me to you, and now we can help other children like Audrey. That's a beautiful way to look at things. It's as if every difficult experience was actually preparation for something better that was still to come. Don't you feel anger or sadness for having gone through so many hardships? Maya thought for a moment before answering. Sometimes I do, especially missing my parents. But I also feel gratitude for having found a new family and a purpose. And what is that purpose? To use my voice to help other people who can't speak for themselves, like I did with you that day in the park. That night, Harrison wrote in his personal journal, a habit he had developed since the events that changed his life. Today, we met Audrey, and I saw again how Maya transformed from a vulnerable child into a strong and compassionate young woman. I kept thinking about how our perspective can change when we go from being recipients of help to people who offer help. Maya didn't just benefit from the Foundation's program, she became an integral part of its mission. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Eleanor had simply talked to me about her feelings of neglect instead of creating such an elaborate and destructive plan. But then I realize that if she had done that, I might never have met Maya, never have created the Foundation, never have discovered my true purpose in life. I'm not saying I'm grateful for Eleanor's betrayal, but I am grateful for the path she inadvertently led me to discover. 2 years later, when Maya was preparing for high school, she received a letter that surprised her. It was from Eleanor. "Dear Maya," the letter began, "I know it might seem strange to receive a letter from me, but I felt I needed to write. Harrison told me how you were instrumental in discovering my plan and for saving the situation. At the time, I was angry at you for ruining my plans. Now I realize you saved us from a much greater tragedy. If I had continued down the destructive path I was on, I would have lost not only Harrison but also my own soul. Your innocent questions and your courageous honesty exposed not only my conspiracy, but also my desperate need for help. Today I work helping other women who are struggling with their own destructive impulses. I use my experience to show them that there are better ways to deal with feelings of inadequacy and abandonment. In a sense, you didn't just save Harrison, you saved me too. I hope you continue to be the brave and observant young woman you are. The world needs people like you. With gratitude and respect, Eleanor." Maya showed the letter to Harrison, who read it with a complex expression. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think Eleanor has really changed, and I think she's right about you having saved more people than you imagined. It's strange to think that telling the truth can have so many different consequences. Truth is powerful, Maya. It can hurt in the moment, but ultimately, it always sets you free. Do you think about replying to her letter?" Harrison considered the question carefully. Perhaps it's time. Perhaps it's time to finally say that I completely forgive her." That week, Harrison wrote to Eleanor for the first time since the trial. His letter was brief but meaningful. "Eleanor, thank you for your letter to Maya and for sharing your journey of personal growth. I want you to know that I completely forgive you for what happened. More than that, I hope you continue to find ways to transform your experience into something that helps other people. If you ever feel you can positively contribute to the Foundation's work, you are welcome to get in touch. Everyone deserves a second chance to make a difference in the world. With peace and hope for your future, Harrison." When Maya learned of Harrison's letter to Eleanor, she smiled with approval. "Mrs. Martha always says that complete forgiveness is when we can wish well for the person who hurt us. And do you agree with her?" "Yes. And I think you have reached that point." "I think so. And in large part, it was thanks to the example you set for me about seeing the best in people, even when they do wrong things." A few months later, Eleanor did get in touch with the Foundation, offering her services as a volunteer therapist for mothers of children in the program. Her offer was accepted after careful evaluation, and she became a valuable part of the team. In their first meeting in years, Harrison and Eleanor met in the park where it had all begun. It was a deliberate choice of location, an acknowledgement of how far both had come since those dark days. "Harrison," said Eleanor, "I know I can never undo what I did, but I hope to dedicate the rest of my life to helping others not make the same mistakes." "Eleanor, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." "And Maya, how is she?" "Maya is preparing for high school. She wants to study psychology. Says she wants to help children who have been through trauma. She truly is special." "She is, and I hope the two of you can work together in the future. I think Maya could learn a lot from your experience about overcoming and second chances. I would love that." When Maya learned about the meeting between Harrison and Eleanor, she asked to meet in person the woman who had been so important in her story. The meeting took place at the shelter, with Mrs. Martha present as a kind of wise mediator. Maya, now 15 and articulate like a young adult, extended her hand to Eleanor with impressive maturity. "Mrs. Eleanor," she said, "I want you to know I hold no anger about what happened. In fact, I am grateful." "Grateful?" Eleanor seemed surprised. "Yes. If you hadn't created that situation, I would never have met Mr. Harrison, never had the opportunities I've had. Sometimes bad things lead us to very good things." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You are an extraordinary young woman, Maya. Mrs. Martha taught me that everyone has goodness in their heart, even when they do bad things. Sometimes they just need help finding that goodness again. And do you believe I have found mine?" Maya studied Eleanor's face with that penetrating gaze that was her trademark. "Yes, I believe so. And I think now you can use your experience to help others find theirs too." At that moment, Mrs. Martha interjected with her characteristic wisdom. "Maya is right. Sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest strengths for helping others who are suffering." "That is what I hope to do," said Eleanor. "To use everything I learned from my mistakes to stop others from making the same ones." 10 years after the events that changed their lives, Harrison, Maya, and Eleanor were gathered for the inauguration of the Maya Foundation's new psychological care center. The center would offer support not only for children but for entire families, including second chance programs for adults who had made significant mistakes. Maya, now 23 and a psychology graduate, had been appointed director of the youth program. Eleanor, as a therapist specializing in destructive relationships, led the adult program. "Mr. Harrison," said Maya during her inauguration speech, "when I was an 8-year-old girl, I asked some simple questions in the park. I never imagined those questions would lead to all of this. And I never imagined a child would teach me the most important lessons of my life," replied Harrison. "But I think the greatest lesson we all learned is that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to do the right thing, and it's never too late to turn our mistakes into opportunities to help others." In the audience, Audrey, now a young college student who had been helped by the foundation years ago, applauded enthusiastically. She was studying law, focusing on children's rights, inspired by her own experience. After the ceremony, Harrison, Maya, Eleanor, and Mrs. Martha gathered in the park for a private conversation. It was like a circle closing, a celebration of how far they had all come. "Mrs. Martha," said Harrison, "did you always know all of this would work out?" "Mr. Harrison, when you work with people, you can never be sure of anything, but I believed in each of your potential to grow and change. And now I see that potential has been realized in ways that surpassed my greatest hopes." Maya turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Eleanor, do you regret anything?" Eleanor thought carefully before answering. "I regret the pain I caused, but I don't regret the path it ultimately created for all of us. I learned that sometimes our greatest mistakes can become our greatest gifts to the world, if we have the courage to transform them." "And you, Mr. Harrison?" asked Maya. "I learned that life has a mysterious way of leading us exactly where we need to be, sometimes through painful experiences, but always leading us to something greater than we could have imagined on our own." "Mrs. Martha, what is the final wisdom you have to share with us?" The elderly woman smiled, her eyes shining with decades of experience. "The final wisdom is that there is no final wisdom. We keep learning, growing, and changing until the last day of our lives. And that genuine relationships based on honesty and mutual care are what give true meaning to our existence." As the sun began to set over the park, the four walked together along the familiar trails. Maya pointed to the bench where she and Harrison had first met. "Do you know what I see when I look at that bench?" "What?" asked the others. "I see the place where a frightened girl found the courage to ask hard questions, where a successful man learned to listen to someone much younger than him, where a friendship began that changed many lives." "And what do you feel when you look at it?" asked Harrison. "Gratitude. Deep gratitude for having had the courage to speak, for you having had the courage to listen, and for all of us having had the courage to grow and change." That night, each of them went home carrying in their hearts the satisfaction of a journey well lived. It had been a journey marked by betrayal and pain, but one that had been transformed into something beautiful through honesty, forgiveness, and the commitment to use their experiences to help others. Harrison wrote in his diary that night, "Today marks 10 years since Maya asked those first questions in the park. 10 years since I discovered I was being poisoned by my own wife. 10 years since my life completely changed direction. If someone had told me back then that one day I would be working side by side with Eleanor to help other families in crisis, I wouldn't have believed it. If they had told me that an 8-year-old girl would become the most important person in my life, I would have laughed. But life has its own plans for us, and sometimes those plans are better than anything we could have imagined on our own. Maya taught me that simple questions can reveal complex truths. Eleanor taught me that even the deepest betrayals can be transformed into opportunities for growth. And Mrs. Martha taught me that real wisdom comes from keeping an open heart to learn from everyone around us, regardless of their age or circumstances. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know we will face it together, with honesty, compassion, and the determination to keep growing and helping others grow too." Maya, in her own home, wrote in her diary, "Today I thought a lot about how we got here. I remember being a scared and lonely girl, thinking I would never have a family again. Now I have a chosen family that is bigger and more loving than anything I could have imagined. Mr. Harrison taught me that having a voice and using it courageously can change lives. Mrs. Eleanor taught me that people can truly change when they have the courage to face their mistakes. And Mrs. Martha taught me that wisdom has no age. It can come from an 8-year-old child or an 80-year-old lady. Tomorrow, I will officially begin my work as director of the youth program. I will be helping children who have gone through experiences similar to mine, and I hope I can give them the same kind of hope and opportunity that was given to me. Sometimes I think about how different it would be if I hadn't asked those questions on that first day. But then I remember that Mrs. Martha always says, we make the choices we are ready to make at the right time, and that when we are ready to grow, the universe presents us with the right opportunities. I am grateful that I was ready to ask those questions. I am grateful that I found people who were ready to listen, and I am grateful that we were all ready to grow together." And Eleanor, in her nightly reflection, 10 years ago, I was a desperate woman, willing to poison my own husband to get attention and control. Today, I'm a therapist who helps other women find healthy ways to deal with their feelings of inadequacy and abandonment. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was years of therapy, reflection, and hard work to understand and change the destructive patterns in my mind, but it was worth every difficult moment. Maya taught me that youth does not mean ignorance, and that sometimes the simplest observations reveal the deepest truths. Harrison taught me that genuine forgiveness is possible, even after deep betrayals, and my work with other women taught me that we all deserve a second chance to do better. I cannot change what I did in the past, but I can use that experience to prevent others from making the same mistakes, and I can dedicate the rest of my life to being the person I should have been from the start. Honest, compassionate, and dedicated to building instead of destroying. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe people can really change like Eleanor changed? Share your opinion in the comments and tell us which part of the story touched your heart the most. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one.